The second half, we have Eric, everybody. Let's hear it for Eric.
My daughter is a therapist that works with children who have experienced severe trauma. So should I be worried that she likes to have long talks with me about my childhood? We were talking about resiliency, and she asked me if there's anybody in my life that I counted on and that was there for me. And so we ended up talking about my Grandma Peggy. My Grandma Peggy lived in Mancos, Colorado, between Cortez and Durango. My grandpa ran the Columbine Bar, and she ran the Mancos Hotel and Cafe. And when my grandpa was murdered during a robbery, she moved into the little apartment behind her cafe and scared the bejeebers out of everybody when the sound of a gun went off. And they went back there and they found her cleaning her rifle. She claimed it wasn't loaded, but I know she wanted everybody in town to know that that little old widow had a .30-06 loaded next to her bed. My mom and I lived in Farmington, about 60 miles away, with my stepdad, my mom's third husband. And on Fridays, he would go to a bar after work, and we knew that we had to get out of town. So I spent a lot of weekends at my grandma's house, and a lot of summers, in fact. And she was giving me a ride home to Farmington one time, and we were on these gravel dirt roads. And I said, "Why are we going this way?" And she says, "I need to show you something." My grandma would tell me stories about bootlegging in the 30s in eastern Oklahoma. And she always had to have a giant car. So she drove a big Oldsmobile Delta 88 Royale, which if you look it up, it's a 2-ton vehicle. Has a huge engine. She wanted all that power. She goes, "I need to show you how to handle it when it fishtails on the gravel roads." And I imagined that was a skill she developed trying to keep bottles of whiskey intact, maybe. She said, "I also want to show you how to take the turns." So she said, you gotta slow down before the turn, but once you're in the turn, you need to accelerate out of the turn. And we practiced this over and over again. We got home so fast, my mom was yelling at her. And she looked at me with a smile on her face, and one of her front teeth had a gold crown. And she looked so gangster. So on another occasion, we were gonna go over to Farmington and play bingo. So she got her morning cook to join us, and we were all sitting on the front bench seat of that Oldsmobile. And when bingo ended, we stopped at Denny's on the way out of Farmington. By the time we left, it was probably around midnight. It was a very dark night, and we were driving on a very desolate road, just a 2-lane road that not even the highway patrol would really patrol because the state line was about halfway. And at one point, my grandma said, "There's been a car that's been way behind us for quite a while, but it's starting to catch up really fast." And sure enough, the car came flying by us, and it got up ahead of us a little ways, and it stopped in the middle of that 2-lane road. My grandma pulled up slowly and came to a stop. And when she did, that vehicle backed up really fast until it was just a few feet from the front of the car. It was a station wagon. And I remember the back opening and the side doors opening, and people that my grandma would describe as hippies piled out. And just my grandma yelled, "Lock the doors." And they stood around the front of the car. And then the driver pushed his way through everybody and walked over to my grandma's door and yanked on it as hard as he could. And you could feel the car move. But when it didn't open, his anger turned to like rage and evil intent. I knew because I'd seen that look on my stepfather's face many times. And he yelled something at my grandma, and then he took his hand and he slapped her window as hard as he could. And when it didn't break, he turned to walk toward the side of the road. We all knew he was going to get a big rock. And that's when my grandma peeled out in reverse. And then she screeched to a halt. She peeled out. It just went barreling through all these people that were jumping out of the way. And she had to go on the shoulder a little bit because there wasn't much room, but she handled it perfectly, and I could hear all this gravel hitting the back of the car. And I jumped and I turned around in the car seat, and I saw all of them jumping back in their wagon. And they had no chance. And I watched that speedometer. It was 100, 110, 120. And any other car would have been catching air. But man, that 2-ton vehicle was just... It was rocking like a cradle trying to put a baby to sleep. We got to Hesper's in the trees and we lost him and never saw him ever again. But my grandma at one point said, Eric, I never want you to worry about your stepdad. I've told him if he ever puts a hand on you, I've got a loaded rifle and I know how to use it. My daughter was right. When the fighting would start at the other end of the house, I remember they're laying in my bed with tears in my eyes, praying for only one person in my life. And that was that my grandma, that nothing would ever happen to her, so that I knew that she would always be there.
Keep it going for Eric.